Dadperfectrevenge. At dawn, the deputy sheriff knocked with an eviction notice. My son-in-law stood across the yard, grinning and yelling, "Your time is up, old man. The house is ours now." I stayed perfectly calm and asked, "Who signed this garbage?" The deputy scanned the page, froze, and his mouth fell open in shock. "My name is George Patterson. I'm 65 years old, and I've spent the last 3 years of retirement in my house on Elmwood Drive in Austin, Texas. Before that, I carried a badge for 35 years as an insurance claims investigator. You learn to read people in that job. Every twitch, every hesitation, every lie poorly told. I thought I'd seen it all. Turns out I hadn't seen anything yet. My son Timothy used to be different. I remember him at 8 years old running to me after school with report cards, insisting I hang them on the refrigerator. He'd sit next to me while I reviewed case files at our kitchen table, asking endless questions about right and wrong. "Dad, how do you know who's lying?" He'd ask. I'd tell him the truth reveals itself if you pay attention to the details. Everything changed when he married Bradley Matthews 2 years ago. At first, I tried to be diplomatic about it. Bradley had charm, the surface kind that works on people who don't look too closely. He talked big about investment opportunities and financial planning, always wearing expensive suits and driving cars he clearly couldn't afford. Timothy seemed happy though, so I kept my observations to myself. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was trusting my son when he started visiting more frequently 4 months ago. He'd drop by with papers asking me to sign insurance updates or retirement planning documents. I'm an investigator, was an investigator, and I should have read every word. But he was my son, my only child. So I'd glance at the headers, see official-looking letterhead, and sign where he pointed. Bradley would hover nearby in my living room, always checking his phone, always asking casual questions about my savings, my retirement accounts, the house's value. I noticed things, of course. The way Timothy's eyes would flicker toward Bradley before he answered any of my questions. How he'd shifted from calling me dad to the more distant father. The expensive Rolex he wore that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. But I'm 65, not senile, and I've investigated enough insurance fraud to recognize the pattern. I just never thought I'd see it in my own living room. The morning it all came apart started like any other Tuesday in June 2024. I was in my garage workshop sanding down an antique bookshelf I'd been restoring for months when I heard a car pull into my driveway. The garage smelled of wood stain and decades of honest work. Tools hung neatly on pegboards I'd installed myself. This was my sanctuary, where I repaired old furniture and tried to forget how quiet the house had become since my wife passed. Then came the knock. Official measured the kind law enforcement learns at the academy. I opened the front door to find Deputy Chuck Davidson standing on my porch, looking uncomfortable in the early morning heat. Austin in June is unforgiving, and sweat already beaded on his forehead. He was young, maybe mid-30s, with the rigid posture of someone who takes his job seriously. "Sir, I'm Deputy Davidson. I'm here to serve you with an eviction notice." For a moment, I just stared at him. Then I saw them, Bradley and Timothy, standing beside their car across the street. Bradley had his phone out recording. When he saw me looking, he grinned and shouted loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, "Your time's up, old man? The house is ours now." Timothy stood beside him, saying nothing. He wouldn't even look at me. My son, who used to run to this same front door every day after school, now stood across the street watching strangers try to kick me out of my home. I turned back to Deputy Davidson, keeping my voice level. "May I see the documents, please?" He handed me a manila folder, his expression apologetic. "Sir, I'm just doing my job." "I understand, Deputy." I opened the folder and felt everything inside me go cold. It was a quitclaim deed supposedly signed by me, transferring full ownership of 20847 Elmwood Drive to Timothy Patterson, dated April 15th, 2024. Notarized. Everything looked official. Everything except 3 things that screamed fraud to anyone who knew what to look for. First, the seal. It was positioned at a 15-degree angle. I'd been signing legal documents for 3 decades, and I never not once placed my seal anywhere but perpendicular to my signature line. Second, the signature itself. Close, but not quite right. The loop on my G was too wide, and I always crossed my T's with a slight upward flourish. This didn't have it. Third, the date didn't match my calendar. April 15th was a Sunday. I never conduct business on Sundays. Never have, never will. I looked up at Deputy Davidson. Really looked at him for the first time. His face was familiar in that way. Young faces sometimes are when you've been in public service long enough. The name tag, the posture, something clicked. "Chuck Davidson," I said slowly. "Your father was Phil Davidson. He worked security at Mutual Insurance, retired about 10 years ago." His eyes widened. "Mr. Patterson, Sir, I didn't realize. You attended my retirement party 3 years ago?" I continued, my mind already 3 steps ahead. You gave a very gracious speech about how my investigation work helped your dad's security team catch that embezzlement ring back in 2018. The blood drained from his face as he understood what he'd just walked into. Across the street, Bradley had stopped recording, sensing something was wrong. The confident smirk was fading from his face. "Deputy Davidson, I need you to wait here for just one moment. Don't go anywhere." I walked back into my house, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. In my office, my real office, the one I've maintained since retirement, I kept copies of every important document related to this property. File cabinets lined one wall, organized with the same precision I'd used for insurance investigations. I pulled out the folder containing the original deed, my updated seal impression, and my actual signature from recent bank documents. When I returned to the porch, Chuck was still standing there, but now he looked like a man who'd realized he was about to be part of something much bigger than a routine eviction. I handed him my folder. "Compare these documents, Deputy. Pay special attention to the seal placement and signature formation. I spent 35 years examining fraudulent documents for insurance companies. This," I tapped the eviction notice, "is amateur work." Chuck studied both sets of documents on my front porch, the Texas sun beating down on us. I watched his jaw tighten as he saw what I'd seen immediately. The differences were glaring once you knew what to look for. Across the street, Bradley was walking toward us now, Timothy trailing behind him like a reluctant shadow. "What's the holdup?" Bradley called out, his voice carrying that entitled tone I'd grown to hate. Just drag the old man out already. I ignored him. Instead, I looked at Chuck and spoke clearly, making sure my voice would carry across the quiet neighborhood. "This is fraud, Deputy Davidson. Document forgery, and I intend to prove it." Chuck stood there for a long moment, the 2 folders in his hands, one real, one fake. I could see him processing it all, the implications spreading across his face like ripples on water. His father had taught him to respect the law, and here he was, caught in the middle of a family crime. "Sir, I apologize for this situation," he finally said. "Given the circumstances, I strongly advise you to contact an attorney immediately. This matter requires investigation." Bradley had reached the edge of my yard by then, his face twisted with frustration. He wore a designer polo shirt that probably cost more than Chuck made in a week. "Hey, you can't just ignore official paperwork. We have every right. Step back, sir." Chuck's voice cut through Bradley's bluster with the authority of someone who'd had enough. "This situation is now under review. Any interference will result in your removal from the premises." Timothy tried next, his voice taking on that pleading tone I'd heard 1,000 times when he was a child asking for something he wanted. "Dad, please, can we just talk inside? This is all a misunderstanding." "No, Timothy." I kept my voice flat, emotionless. "There's nothing to discuss." Chuck nodded at me, then at Bradley and Timothy. "I'll be filing a report about these discrepancies. You'll all be contacted." He walked back to his patrol car, and I watched Bradley's confidence crumble with every step the deputy took. After Chuck drove away, I expected them to leave. Instead, Timothy approached my front door, tears streaming down his face. Real tears, too. He always could cry on command, even as a grown man. "Dad, please," he sobbed. "This is all Bradley's fault." He said it was just paperwork. I didn't know. I looked past his tears, past the performance to what he was holding. A brand new iPhone 15 Pro, the titanium case catching the morning sun. Those retail for about $120, and on the screen, clearly visible before he noticed me looking and tilted it away, was a confirmation email. "Your flight to Paris, $8,400 for 2 passengers, $8,400 for a vacation, while trying to steal my house. Go home, Timothy." "But Dad," I said, "go home." I stepped back and closed the door, turned the deadbolt, stood there listening to him cry on my porch for another minute before Bradley called him back to the car. Only when I heard them drive away did I allow myself to feel it. The full weight of what my son had tried to do. I walked through my house, this house I'd bought 30 years ago when Timothy was still in middle school, when my wife Sarah was alive and the world made sense. Every room held memories. The kitchen where we'd baked birthday cakes and Sarah had taught Timothy to scramble eggs. The living room where Timothy learned to ride his bike in circles during bad weather while we cheered him on. The backyard where I'd taught him to throw a baseball until my arms ached. When had it changed? I forced myself to think back, to really examine the past 4 months. Timothy's first visit after the long silence had been in February. He'd shown up on a Sunday afternoon with takeout from Franklin Barbecue, the expensive place downtown that charges $30 per pound. "I'm sorry we haven't been around more, Dad," he'd said, settling onto the same couch where he used to watch cartoons. "Bradley's been so busy with his financial consulting business, and I've been helping him, and time just got away from us." I'd been so happy to see him that I hadn't questioned it, hadn't wondered why. After 18 months of barely speaking to me, he'd suddenly remembered I existed. The second visit came a week later. Dad, I was thinking about your estate planning. You've got everything organized, right? Just want to make sure you're protected. He'd had papers with him that time, forms about power of attorney, trust documents, beneficiary updates. I'd glanced at the headers. They looked legitimate, and I'd signed where he indicated trusting my son like any father would. The third visit, Bradley had come along. He'd wandered through my house with the casual entitlement of someone evaluating property for purchase. This place has got to be worth, what, $650,000, maybe $700,000? He'd asked, running his hand along my kitchen granite countertops. Prime Austin real estate. You ever think about downsizing, George? All this space for one person seems wasteful. I'd laughed it off then. Made a joke about them prying my house keys from my cold, dead hands. Bradley had laughed too, but his eyes hadn't. Those cold, calculating eyes that were already spending my money. Now I understood. Every visit, every document, every casual question about my finances. They'd been building toward this for months. The forged deed was just the final piece of their puzzle. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in years. Leonard Brooks, a lawyer who'd handled my divorce case 15 years ago when Sarah's medical bills had strained our finances beyond repair. He answered on the third ring. George Patterson, to what do I owe this rare pleasure? Lenny, I need a recommendation. Best real estate attorney in Austin, someone who handles fraud cases. There was a pause. What kind of fraud are we talking about? The kind involving forged property deeds and family members who think a retired insurance investigator won't notice amateur hour. Another pause, longer this time. Dorothy Freeman, she's expensive, but she's worth every penny, handles this kind of thing regularly. Former prosecutor, knows the system inside and out. I'll text you her number. Thanks, Lenny. George, whatever's happening, be careful. Family cases get messy fast. I hung up and looked at my house again. My house, the one I'd paid off 10 years ago through careful planning and living below my means. The one where I'd raised my son, taught him right from wrong, showed him what integrity looked like, and he'd tried to steal it. I felt something shift inside me then, a cold clarity I recognized from my years investigating insurance fraud. The transformation from victim to investigator. I'd spent 35 years watching people try to game the system, manipulate documentation, exploit loopholes. I'd seen every trick, every scheme, every desperate play. They wanted to play fraud games with an investigator who'd spent 35 years dealing with document forgery. I almost smiled. All right then, I said quietly to my empty living room, to the house that was still mine, to the future I was about to reclaim. Let's see how this plays out. The next morning, I had my first appointment with Dorothy Freeman. Her office occupied the third floor of a renovated warehouse in downtown Austin, the kind of place that charged by results rather than hours. Glass windows looked out over the city I'd called home my entire adult life. The receptionist, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s, offered coffee while I waited, which I accepted. Professional courtesy, even when your world is burning down. Dorothy herself was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with the kind of calm competence that comes from handling difficult cases without drama. She wore a navy business suit that spoke of success without showing off. We shook hands and she gestured me to a leather chair across from her mahogany desk. Mr. Patterson, Lenny Brooks spoke highly of you. Just George now. Haven't carried a badge in 3 years. Once an investigator, always an investigator in my book. She opened the folder I'd sent ahead. I've reviewed the documents you scanned over. This is quitclaim deed fraud. Clear as day. Walk me through what happened. I laid out the timeline methodically, a habit from years of examining insurance claims. The visits from Timothy, Bradley's probing questions. The morning Deputy Davidson appeared at my door. When I described spotting the forged seal angle and signature inconsistencies, Dorothy leaned forward. You caught that immediately. I've examined thousands of documents over 35 years. You develop an eye for these things. The angle was wrong, the signature was close but not perfect, and the date was impossible. I never do business on Sundays. She smiled. The kind of smile lawyers give when they realize they're working with someone who understands the game. This makes my job considerably easier. The deed is dated April 15th, allegedly notarized by Barbara Phillips. Have you contacted her? Not yet. Thought I'd wait for professional guidance. Smart. Let's visit her together this afternoon. If the notarization is legitimate, we have one problem. If it's forged or if the document was switched, we have a criminal case. 3 hours later, we sat in Barbara Phillips's modest office on South First Street. The office smelled like coffee and stress, with stacks of legal documents covering every available surface. She was a woman in her early 50s who'd been notarizing documents in Travis County for 18 years. She knew me by reputation, though we'd never worked together directly. When Dorothy showed her the quitclaim deed, she put on reading glasses and studied it carefully under her desk lamp. That's my seal, she said slowly, or rather, it looks like my seal. But she turned to her computer, pulling up her digital records, April 15th, 2024. Yes, I notarized a document that day for Timothy Patterson, but it was a power of attorney for financial decisions, not a quitclaim deed. The silence in that office felt heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and distant traffic. "You're certain?" Dorothy asked. "Absolutely. I log every document in my computer system and keep physical copies. Look, here's my entry. Power of attorney for financial decisions, standard form." She looked up at us, her face pale. Someone used my seal on a different document. Or they switched the documents after I notarized the legitimate one. We left with a sworn statement from Barbara and copies of her records. In Dorothy's BMW, I stared out the window at Austin traffic, my mind working through the implications. "They planned this for months," I said. "Every visit, every paper Timothy asked me to sign. They were setting up the infrastructure for this theft." "Most fraud happens over time," Dorothy agreed. "Navigating through downtown traffic, the question is what else they might have attempted. I'd recommend hiring a private investigator to dig into Bradley and Timothy's finances. If they're desperate enough to forge property documents, there's usually more beneath the surface." She gave me a name. Harold Anderson, former FBI, now private sector, specializing in financial investigations. His retainer was $5,000, which I paid that evening via bank transfer. Expensive, but I'd learned long ago that good help costs money. 2 days later, Harold sat in my living room, a sharp-eyed man in his mid-40s who carried himself like someone who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and remained unimpressed. He wore a simple gray suit and took notes in an old-fashioned paper notebook. "Mr. Patterson, I've done preliminary research on Bradley Matthews and your son Timothy. Before I go deeper, you should know that investigations like this sometimes reveal uncomfortable truths. I've been an investigator for 35 years, Mr. Anderson. I've heard uncomfortable truths before breakfast. What did you find?" He opened his laptop on my coffee table. "Bradley Matthews lists himself as a financial advisor, claims to run an investment platform called CryptoVision. It's registered as an LLC, but there's no actual business activity. No employees, no office, no product. What there is, however, is a pattern of cash deposits from multiple individuals, ranging from $15,000 to $75,000 each. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. How much total? Best estimate, over $380,000 in the past 15 months. And what is he doing with this money? Living well beyond his means. He leases a BMW X5 for $900 a month, rents a luxury apartment downtown for $320 a month, takes frequent trips to Europe. Your son's credit card statements show similar patterns. High-end shopping, expensive restaurants, first-class flights, they're running a con. That would be my assessment. The technical term is Ponzi scheme, though this one hasn't reached the stage where it collapses spectacularly. My guess is Bradley's getting pressure from his investors, which is why he needs your house. An asset worth $650,000 would buy him breathing room. After Harold left, I walked through my house again, seeing it differently now. This wasn't just my home. To Bradley and Timothy, it was an escape hatch, a way to pay off angry investors and disappear to Europe with my son on my money, leaving me with nothing. The casual cruelty of it was almost impressive. I stood in my workshop, running my hand over the antique bookshelf I'd been restoring. The wood was oak warped from decades of moisture damage, but underneath the damage, you could still see the craftsman's original intent. Beautiful work, just neglected. Some things could be restored, others needed to be discarded. The next few weeks moved with the precision of a military operation. Dorothy filed the civil lawsuit to invalidate the quitclaim deed and prevent any sale of the property. Harold continued his investigation, building a comprehensive case about Bradley's Ponzi scheme. We had phone records, bank statements, investor contracts, everything documented with the thoroughness of a federal investigation. Then we waited for the legal system to work. The preliminary hearing came faster than expected. Judge Eugene Williams expedited the case due to the clear evidence of fraud. I sat in the Travis County Courthouse on a humid Thursday morning in August, wearing my best Navy suit. The same courtroom where I testified as an expert witness in insurance fraud cases years before. Bradley and Timothy sat across the aisle with their lawyer, Howard Sterling. Sterling was expensive, the kind of attorney who charged $800 an hour and used every trick in the book, but tricks don't work when the evidence is overwhelming. Dorothy presented our case methodically. The forged signature analysis, Barbara Phillips' testimony about the switch documents, Harold's financial investigation showing Bradley's Ponzi scheme, phone records of conversations where they planned to sell my house and disappear to Europe. I watched Bradley's face during the phone recording playback. His own voice filled the courtroom. Once we get the house, we need to move fast. Sell it before he can fight back. Timothy's voice responded, "What about Dad? Where does he go? Bradley? Who cares? Nursing home somewhere cheap. He won't even know the difference in a few years." The judge's gavel came down hard. Property transfer invalidated. Criminal charges referred to the district attorney. Bradley and Timothy arrested on the courthouse steps. The final sentencing hearing came 8 weeks later. Bradley received 4 years in federal prison for securities fraud, plus 18 months for document forgery, 5.5 years total, with mandatory restitution to his 11 investors. Timothy got 12 months probation, with 200 hours of community service. I watched my son accept his sentence with tears streaming down his face. Real tears this time. The judge's words were harsh. "You betrayed your father's trust in the most profound way possible. You helped facilitate an attempt to leave him homeless and destitute. That this court shows leniency is a mercy you did not extend to your own parent." After the hearing, I sat in my truck in the courthouse parking lot for a long time. It was over. My house was safe. The investors would get most of their money back. The legal system had worked exactly the way it was supposed to work. But my relationship with Timothy was finished. That evening, I sat on my front porch on Elmwood Drive, watching the sun set over Austin. My house, my home, exactly where it had been 6 months ago when this all started, but somehow feeling more solid, more real. A car pulled up. Deputy Chuck Davidson, the young officer who delivered that eviction notice what felt like a lifetime ago. "Mr. Patterson," he said, walking up to the porch. "I wanted to stop by. I've been following the case in the news." "Deputy Davidson, how's your father doing?" He smiled. "Good, sir. He wanted me to tell you he's proud of how this all turned out. Said you showed them what happens when you mess with someone who knows the system." We talked for a while about his career plans, about the case, about how fraud cases often have human costs beyond the financial. He was a good kid, reminded me of Timothy at that age. Before Bradley, before greed corrupted everything, after he left, I went to my workshop in the garage. The antique bookshelf sat there, finally complete. I'd finished the restoration during the court proceedings, working with my hands while lawyers worked with their words. The wood gleamed under the workshop lights, beautiful and functional, ready for another century of use. Some things could be restored, some things couldn't. 3 weeks after sentencing, a letter arrived, prison postmark, Timothy's handwriting. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter unopened in front of me for a long time. Finally, I read it. It was 3 pages of apologies, explanations, regrets. He blamed Bradley's influence. He blamed his own greed and stupidity. He blamed the stress of debt and the fear of failure. He said he understood now what he'd done, how wrong it was, how deeply he'd betrayed me. He asked if I could ever forgive him. I read it twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in the desk drawer where I kept important documents. The letter sat there alongside the court judgments, the property deed with my name on it, all the evidence of justice served. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe someday we'd have the conversation he wanted about forgiveness and redemption. But forgiveness isn't the same as trust, and trust, once broken this completely, doesn't just grow back because someone says they're sorry. The truth is, I'd lost my son long before Bradley came along. I'd lost him the moment he decided money was more important than family. Bradley just made it visible. I walked back to my workshop and picked up a new project, a Victorian writing desk from the 1890s that needed complete refinishing. The wood was damaged, the joints loose, but underneath I could see the quality craftsmanship. It would take months of careful work to restore it properly. I had the time, I had my home, I had my peace. Justice, I'd learned during 35 years investigating fraud, isn't about revenge or cruelty. It's about balance. Ensuring that actions have appropriate consequences, that the system works fairly for everyone, that truth matters more than manipulation. Standing in my workshop, running my hand over the old desk's damaged surface, I felt something settle inside me. Not happiness exactly, there was too much loss for that. But satisfaction, completion, the sense that everything had unfolded exactly as it should. Bradley was in prison where he belonged. Timothy was learning there are consequences for betraying family. My house remained mine. The 11 investors would receive justice. Most importantly, I'd proven something to myself and anyone watching. You don't have to be young or rich or powerful to fight back when someone tries to steal your life's work. You just need to pay attention to the details, know when something doesn't look right, and have enough backbone to stand up for what's yours. The truth really does reveal itself if you're careful enough to see it. I taught that to my son once, long ago. Now I was teaching it to anyone who might be facing something similar. Justice isn't revenge. It's when everyone gets what they deserve. And I got mine. My house, my peace, my dignity intact. I picked up the sandpaper and got to work. The desk wouldn't restore itself, and I had nothing but time. When someone shows you their true character through their actions, believe them the first time, because the person who'll steal your house will steal anything else they can get their hands on. The best defense against family betrayal isn't hoping it won't happen. It's staying sharp enough to spot the warning signs before they can finish the job.